My parents looked me dead in the eye and coldly stated right in front of my kids, "Your girls just aren't important enough for us to waste money on Christmas gifts this year." My sister Valerie didn't even try to hide her smirk as she added, "Why bother wasting resources on those little bastards anyway?" In that moment I saw my daughters, 8-year-old Emma and 5-year-old Lily, well up with tears they were desperately trying to hide, and a dead silence fell over the room. I slowly stood up, pulled out my phone, and said one single sentence that turned my parents' faces ghost white and caused the entire holiday atmosphere in their luxury mansion to shatter into pieces. To understand how we got to this point, I need to take you back a few weeks. I'm 34, working as a lead software engineer at a major tech firm. 3 years ago, my life turned into a living hell when my ex-husband, Trevor, left me for his 23-year-old assistant, leaving me with 2 kids and a mountain of debt. The divorce was nasty and exhausting, but I survived. I pulled 14-hour shifts to buy us a modest but cozy house in a good school district. My daughters are my entire world. They are the center of my universe. In my family, there was always a golden child. My younger sister, Valerie. My parents practically worshipped the ground she walked on. When she married Justin, a corporate lawyer from an old money family, my parents acted like they'd hit the jackpot. Their wedding cost more than my entire college tuition. Meanwhile, my father, Robert, always looked down on my marriage to Trevor, a simple middle school teacher, constantly making snide remarks about my modest aspirations. Throughout this entire December, I felt a strange tension. My parents invited us for Christmas, promising a real family holiday. The girls were waiting for this day like it was a miracle. They spent weeks preparing gifts for everyone, handmade cards and hand-painted photo frames. We pulled into my parents' driveway just as the Christmas lights were twinkling against the snow. Emma and Lily were bouncing in their car seats, hoping for a miracle, hoping that Grandma and Grandpa would finally give them a real hug. At the door, we were met by my mother, Patricia, wearing a designer cashmere sweater. Her smile was tight and rehearsed. She gave me a brief, dry hug and barely spared a glance at her granddaughters. "Come in, come in. Valerie and Justin are already here with the boys," she tossed over her shoulder as she walked back into the house. The living room was already chaotic. My nephews, Chase and Braden, were tearing around a massive tree piled high with boxes and expensive gift wrap. My father sat in his leather armchair nursing a glass of expensive scotch, even though it was only 2 in the afternoon. He just nodded vaguely in our direction, not even bothering to stand up to greet us. Everything looked picture-perfect, like something out of a magazine. The smell of cinnamon, pine, and flawless table settings. But behind the facade, I felt a deep chill. Valerie swept out of the kitchen looking like a cover model, perfect hair, a flawless dress. "Oh, you actually made it," she said, her tone suggesting our presence was a minor inconvenience. Her sons were already being entitled brats. When Emma and Lily tentatively approached them, 10-year-old Chase just sneered, "We're busy, go away." Valerie didn't even correct him. She just brushed it off, continuing to brag to my mother about Justin's new yacht. During dinner, we were relegated to the very end of the long table, as far away from my parents and Valerie's family as possible. It felt like a class system in action. My mother spent the whole evening ignoring Emma's attempts to talk about her school play, constantly interrupting her to ask Justin about his latest high-profile court cases. The tension was building, but I swallowed my pride for the sake of the kids. I thought that when it came time for presents, things would change, and my girls would finally feel like they belonged. I had no idea that this night would be the beginning of the end for my father's construction business, and would change our lives forever. The atmosphere in that dining room was thick enough to choke on. After the awkward dinner where we were treated like uninvited guests, we moved back to the grand living room for the main event. My daughters, Emma and Lily, sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, clutching their handmade gift bags. They had spent 3 nights working on those cards, pouring their little hearts into glitter and glue, believing that this was the year they would finally earn their grandparents' love. I watched them, and a knot of anxiety began to tighten in my chest. "Present time," my father announced, his voice booming with a forced cheerfulness that didn't extend to us. What followed was a vulgar display of excess. Chase and Braden were showered with gifts that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. A custom-built gaming PC for Chase, a professional-grade mountain bike for Braden, designer sneakers, and envelopes stuffed with cash. My parents sat there beaming, filming the boys with their iPhones as if they were capturing a royal coronation. Valerie and Justin were lounging on the love seat, sipping wine and exchanging smug glances. Every time a new gift was opened, Valerie would make a comment like, "Oh, Mom, you shouldn't have." But of course, the boys only deserved the best. Meanwhile, Emma and Lily just sat there. And sat. And sat. The mountain of gifts under the tree was dwindling rapidly. I saw Emma's eyes darting around looking for a box. Any box with her name on it. She's 8, she's smart, and she was starting to do the math. Lily, being only 5, didn't quite grasp the cruelty yet. She was just waiting for her turn to join the fun. When the last of the boys' gifts was unwrapped, a heavy, suffocating silence settled over the room. "Mom," Emma whispered, her voice trembling just enough to break my heart. "Is it our turn yet?" I looked at Patricia, my mother. She was busy rearranging some ornaments on the tree, avoiding my gaze. "Mom," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I think you missed the girls' presents. Are they in the other room?" My mother didn't even look up. She took a slow sip of her Chardonnay and exchanged a knowing look with my father. Robert cleared his throat, leaning back in his leather chair, the ice in his scotch clinking like a death knell. "There are no other presents, Alice," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean, no other presents? We talked about this. The girls have been looking forward to this for a month." Valerie let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Honestly, Alice, let's be real. We decided as a family that we needed to prioritize. Resources aren't infinite, and it's not like these kids are." "Well, they aren't exactly the core of the family, are they?" I felt a roar of protectiveness surge through me, but I kept my voice low for the sake of my daughters. "They are your grandchildren, Robert. They are your nieces, Valerie. What the hell are you talking about?" "They're Trevor's kids," my father snapped, finally looking at me with that familiar expression of disappointment. "The man who walked out on you. Why should we invest in a legacy that isn't even ours? Valerie's boys carry our values. They have a father who is a success. They are the future of this family. Your situation. It's a tragedy, but we shouldn't have to pay for your failure to keep a husband." I looked at my daughters. Lily had finally realized what was happening and was hiding her face in Emma's sweater. Emma's jaw was set, her eyes burning with a mix of shame and fury that no 8-year-old should ever have to feel. She realized in that exact moment that to the people who were supposed to be her family, she was a second-class citizen. A waste of resources. I had spent my whole life trying to prove my worth to these people. I had worked twice as hard as Valerie, got into a better school, built a career from nothing while she lived off Justin's salary and my father's loans. But as I looked at my parents' cold, indifferent faces and my sister's triumphant smirk, something shifted inside me. The need for their approval simply evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. They didn't know about my secret. They didn't know that for the past year, I had been more than just a software engineer. I had been quietly building a massive investment portfolio thanks to an early-stage startup exit they hadn't bothered to ask about. More importantly, they didn't know about my relationship with David Henderson. My father's construction company, Robert & Sons, was on the verge of a major expansion, or a total collapse. He needed the Henderson Technologies contract to survive the next 5 years. It was the only thing keeping them in that mansion and the only reason Justin was still being nice to him. I took a deep breath. The month-long countdown to their ruin had just begun, and they were the ones who had pulled the trigger. I reached into my pocket and felt my phone. I had a choice to make. I could cry or I could change the power dynamic of this family forever. "Is that your final word?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "My children aren't important enough for you?" "That's exactly what we're saying," my mother replied, finally meeting my eyes with a look of pure ice. "You should probably take them home now. They're starting to bring down the mood." The air in the room felt like it had been sucked out by a vacuum. My daughters were shaking, not from the cold but from the sheer naked rejection. I felt a visceral heat rising in my chest, a level of rage I didn't know I possessed, but I forced it down into a cold, hard knot. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, tall and steady, while my family looked at me like I was a beggar they were finally shooing off their porch. I see, I said, my voice sounding like cracking ice. So this is about value. About who matters and who is a waste of resources. Valerie stood up, smoothing her designer dress, her face twisted in a mask of fake pity. Oh, Alice, don't be so dramatic. It's just business. You've always been so sensitive. If you had married someone with a backbone instead of that loser Trevor, maybe things would be different. But you didn't. You chose a life of struggle. And now you're upset that we won't subsidize it. Your kids. They just aren't a priority for the family brand. The family brand, I repeated. I looked at Justin, who was checking his watch, clearly bored by the poor sister's drama. Then I looked at my father, Robert. He wouldn't even meet my eyes now. He was busy showing Chase how to use his new $3,000 laptop. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I had been holding in reserve for months. David Henderson. What are you doing? My mother snapped. If you're going to call your therapist to whine about us, do it in the car. We're trying to enjoy the evening. I ignored her. I hit the call button and put it on speaker. The room went quiet as the ringing tone echoed through the high-ceilinged living room. Alice. A deep professional voice answered after 2 rings. It's Christmas. Is everything okay? Hey, David. Sorry to disturb your dinner, I said, my eyes locked on my father's face. I've been thinking about that partnership proposal for the Henderson Technologies expansion. The one regarding the infrastructure and construction oversight for the new Northridge facility. My father's head snapped up. His face went from indifferent to sharply alert in a microsecond. He knew that name. Everyone in the tri-state construction industry knew David Henderson. I'm listening, David said, his tone turning serious. I told you last month that I wouldn't move forward without your capital and your technical oversight. You're the only person I trust with the logistics of a $40 million project. I'm in, I said. On one condition. As a 50-50 partner, I want full veto power over all subcontractors and construction firms. I want to personally vet every single company that works on this project to ensure their values align with ours. I don't want to work with people who lack integrity. There was a brief pause. That's a standard request for a partner of your level, Alice. Consider it done. We'll have the legal team draft the merger papers on Monday. Welcome aboard. Thanks, David. Merry Christmas. I ended the call and tucked the phone back into my bag. The silence in the room was now absolute. Even the boys had stopped playing. My father had stood up, his face a sickly shade of gray. Alice. He started, his voice cracking. What? What was that? You know David Henderson? Since when do you have that kind of capital? Since I spent the last 9 years being the disappointing daughter who actually worked for a living dad, I said, my voice dripping with venom. I didn't spend my bonuses on luxury cars or country club memberships like Valerie. I invested. I bought into tech startups before they went public. I've been sitting on a portfolio that could buy and sell this house 10 times over. You're lying, Valerie hissed, though her eyes were darting to Justin, who now looked terrified. Justin, the lawyer, knew exactly what Henderson Technologies meant. If they landed that contract, their firm would be set for life. If they didn't, my father's company, which Justin was heavily invested in, was going to fold within the year. I don't lie, Valerie, I said. That's your department. You told me tonight that my children aren't important enough for a $20 toy. You told me they aren't core family. Well, guess what? Your business isn't important enough for my contract. Now, wait a minute, Alice, my father said, stepping toward me with his hands out in a pleading gesture. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Family is family. We might have been a bit blunt earlier, but we can talk about this. A bit blunt. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You let your daughter call my children bastards. You told Emma and Lily they were worthless to their faces. You wanted to play a game of value and resources? Fine. I'm playing. I grabbed Emma and Lily's hands. We're leaving. And don't bother calling. I'm blocking all of you. If you want to discuss the Northridge contract, talk to my attorneys. But I'll give you a spoiler. The answer is no. As we walked toward the door, my mother screamed, "You can't do this. You'll ruin us. Your father's heart can't take this stress." I didn't even look back. Maybe he should have invested in a better heart. Or a better daughter. We stepped out into the cold night air, the heavy oak door slamming behind us. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could actually breathe. But as I strapped the girls into their car seats, I saw Emma looking at me with wide, frightened eyes. "Mom," she whispered, "are we in trouble?" "No, baby," I said, kissing her forehead. "We're finally free. But the next few weeks are going to get very, very ugly." I was right. By the time we reached our driveway, my phone was already vibrating with the first of 100 desperate, angry, and pleading messages. The war had officially begun. The 2 weeks following that Christmas night were a blur of digital warfare and psychological pressure. I had blocked their numbers, but they found every possible crack in my defenses. Emails from my mother, LinkedIn messages from my father, even Facebook DMs from Justin's paralegals. They were desperate. My father's firm was bleeding cash, and the North Ridge project was their only lifeline. Without it, the bank would begin the foreclosure process on their mansion by the end of the quarter. Valerie was the worst. She sent a 3-page manifesto to my personal email, claiming I was mentally unstable, and that my divorce trauma was causing me to hallucinate business deals just to spite her. She even had the audacity to say that Emma and Lily were too young to remember the unfortunate misunderstanding, and that I was weaponizing my children for a vendetta. I didn't reply. I just forwarded every single message to my attorney, Richard Chan, and told him to keep building the file. But the real blow came on the second Tuesday of January. I was at my office, buried in technical specs for the Henderson merger, when security called. My father was in the lobby. He didn't have an appointment and he looked distressed. Against my better judgment, I told them to give him 5 minutes in a glass-walled conference room. I didn't want him anywhere near my private desk. When I walked in, I barely recognized him. Robert, the man who always looked like he owned the world, looked like a defeated ghost. His suit was wrinkled and his hands were shaking. He didn't lead with anger this time. He led with a plea. "Alice, please," he rasped, not even standing up. "Your mother hasn't stopped crying. The doctor put me on heart medication. We were wrong, okay? We were cruel. We'll apologize to the girls. We'll buy them whatever they want. Just tell David Henderson that my firm is still in the running. If we lose this contract, I lose everything. 40 years of work, Alice. Gone." I sat down across from him, feeling nothing but a dull, hollow ache. "Is that what you think this is about, Dad? You think you can just buy them whatever they want now and it fixes the fact that you told them they didn't matter? You didn't just hurt my feelings. You attacked their identity." "It was a mistake," he yelled, then winced, clutching his chest. We were stressed. Valerie was in our ear about the boys' inheritance and, "Look, I'll make it up to you. I'll change my will. I'll make sure Emma and Lily are treated exactly like the boys. 25% each. Just don't kill my business." I looked at him and for a second I almost felt pity. But then I remembered Lily sobbing into her hands on the sofa while he drank his scotch and watched. "It's too late, Dad. The Morrison Group already signed the preliminary agreement with David this morning. They have a better safety record and, frankly, better ethics." His face went from pale to a deep, dangerous purple. He stood up, leaning over the table. "You think you've won? You think you're the hero here? You're destroying your own family over a few toys. You're a monster, Alice. A cold-blooded, vindictive monster. If you go through with this, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? You will never have a mother or a father again." "I haven't had them for a long time, Robert," I said quietly. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise. I watched him stumble out of the office, and I thought that was the end of it. But the twist came that evening. I got home to find a social worker from Child Protective Services standing on my porch. My heart stopped. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice trembling as I saw Emma watching from the window. "We received an anonymous tip," the woman said, her face neutral. "Allegations of emotional instability, a history of psychiatric issues, and concerns that you are using your children as pawns in a financial extortion scheme against your parents. We need to conduct a home visit and interview the girls." I felt the world tilt. Valerie, or maybe my mother, they weren't just trying to save the business anymore. They were trying to take my children because I took their money. They had escalated this from a business dispute to a nuclear strike on my life. I stood there looking at this stranger, realized that the monsters weren't done yet. They had found the one thing I loved more than my dignity, and they were trying to rip it out of my hands. I pulled out my phone one more time. Not to call David Henderson, but to call the private investigator I had hired a week ago to look into Justin's business expenses and my father's off-the-books construction materials. "Hey Marcus," I said, my voice shaking with a new kind of fury. "Whatever you found on the Robert & Sons tax filings, release it. All of it. To the IRS and the district attorney. Tonight." The war wasn't just about a contract anymore. It was about survival. The following 72 hours felt like a fever dream. The CPS worker left after 2 hours of interviewing my daughters, realizing quickly that my home was a place of love, and that the anonymous tip was a malicious fabrication. But the damage was done. The line had been crossed so far that there was no way back. By Friday morning, the local news was buzzing with a massive investigation into Robert & Sons for systemic tax fraud and the use of substandard materials in government-funded projects. The information my investigator leaked was the final nail in the coffin. By the end of the month, my father's company was in receivership. The Henderson deal was gone, the bank had pulled their lines of credit, and Justin, the successful corporate lawyer, was being investigated as an accomplice to the financial discrepancies. The Golden family was being dismantled in the public eye piece by piece. One final Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. I expected a process server or a journalist, but when I opened it, I found my mother, Patricia. She wasn't wearing her designer cashmere or her practiced smile. She looked older, smaller, and her eyes were red from weeks of crying. She wasn't there to fight. She was there because she had nothing left to fight with. "They're taking the house, Alice," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Robert had a minor stroke last night. He's stable, but everything is gone. The cars, the club, the accounts. Valerie is moving to the coast to stay with Justin's parents because she can't afford her mortgage. Is this what you wanted?" I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt a profound, heavy clarity. "I didn't want this, Mom," I said calmly. "I wanted to come over for Christmas and have you hug my daughters. I wanted you to look at the cards they made and tell them they were beautiful. I wanted you to treat them like they were part of the family. You're the one who decided that money and status were the only things that defined a person's value. I just showed you what happens when you lose those things." "We're your parents," she sobbed. "How could you be so cold?" "You told my children they were unimportant to their faces," I replied. "You tried to have CPS take them away from me. You didn't just play with money, Mom. You played with lives. You didn't care about being a parent until you needed my bank account to stay in that mansion." I didn't let her in. I couldn't. The toxicity was too deep, the wounds too fresh. She left an envelope on the porch, a handwritten letter full of apologies that felt 10 years too late, and drove away in a car that was likely about to be repossessed. 6 months have passed since that night. My partnership with David Henderson has flourished, and my daughter's college funds are more than secure. Emma and Lily are in therapy and they're doing better. They've learned that their worth isn't tied to a grandfather's approval or a pile of expensive gifts. They've learned that their mother will burn the world down to protect them. My parents live in a small 2-bedroom rental now. I heard through my lawyer that my mother took a job at a local library. Occasionally she sends cards to the girls. I don't hide them, but I don't force the relationship either. I tell the girls that Grandma is learning how to be a better person, and that maybe one day when they are older they can decide if they want to know her. As for Valerie, we haven't spoken since she sent me a final venomous text blaming me for her ruined life. I blocked that number too. Sometimes I sit on my porch and think about that Christmas tree and the mountain of gifts that weren't for us. I wonder if I went too far. I wonder if a simple misunderstanding over toys should have ended in the destruction of a legacy. But then I remember Emma's face when she asked if she was broken because she didn't get a present. The truth is, family isn't a biological entitlement. It's a choice you make every single day in how you treat the people you claim to love. My parents chose their pride in their golden daughter over two innocent children. I simply chose my children over everything else. The house is quiet now. The girls are asleep upstairs. I'm not sure if we'll ever have a normal family holiday again, and honestly, I'm okay with that. We've built our own world, and in this world everyone is important enough.